Hello, how are you doing? A while ago I made a video about some recent booktube favorites, and I mentioned in that I have a new reading chair on its way, and it's arrived about 3 months late. I don't know what the big delay was with this chair coming, whether it was to do with Brexit or the pandemic or both or some other factor, but yeah, it's finally here, and I set it up in my library. It's looking really great. I spent the afternoon reading there yesterday, and it's just a really cozy, lovely spot. I wanted to film from there this book haul video, but I couldn't get the angle of the camera right or the lighting right. It just didn't really work out as a place that I could do any filming. So I'll show the chair, but I figured it was better just to film in this spot that I normally do because there's natural lighting here, and it's just better. So I have a big group of new books that I'm really excited to talk about. It's a whole mixture of novels and short stories and some nonfiction and some reprints of classic books. So it's a whole mixture of books. So starting with She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. And this is a novel set in 1345 in China in a famine-stricken village where a brother and sister get their fortune told, and the brother is told that he is going to achieve greatness, and for his sister there's nothing, but she decides that she wants to change that fate and so become a great emperor herself. And so it's about that journey, and it's described as a queer reimagining of the dawn of the Ming Dynasty, and also described as a cross between Mulan meets the Song of Achilles, which is a kind of corny way to describe it, but actually I really like the sound of that. So yeah, I think this would be a novel that I'll really enjoy. The Butterfly Lampshade by Aimee Bender, and this is about a girl who wakes up in the middle of the night once to find her mother being taken away because she's had a psychotic episode. And while her mother is being taken away, she's staring up at this lamp that's covered with these images of butterflies. So that's why it's called the Butterfly Lampshade. And while that's happening, she imagines that a butterfly falls off from the lampshade into a glass of water, which she drinks. And so many years later, she's recalling this incident. And so it's about the process of memory, but also about mental health issues, like especially amongst our family members. Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Coopersmith. And this is a novel about Vietnam over a wide span of time and about a whole range of characters, especially I think two women that go missing at different points in history, one in the 80s and then one in the 2000s. And it's a novel I think that blends folklore alongside history to tell this unique story about Vietnam over the past 50 or 60 years. And it's described as part puzzle, part ghost story, and part revenge thriller. So I'm kind of concerned that maybe the sort of the plotting of this novel might overtake the sort of characterization or the in the storytelling, but I am intrigued to try this novel. Godspeed by Nickolas Butler. This is a novel about a group of male friends that have been friends ever since they were childhood, and when they grow up they form a construction company together, and their first big commission is by this mysterious multi-millionaire lawyer from California who wants a project completed very quickly, and so it's a really big opportunity for them, but also it's slightly dodgy circumstances, and there's a whole mystery surrounding this whole project, and so yeah, it's about the conflict of that and how that plays out. The Giant Dark by Sarvat Hasin. This is a gorgeous cover, isn't it? I mean, just look at this. So this author was born in Pakistan but lives in London and works in the theater, and this is subtitled A Fairy Tale in 2 Acts. So it's about a woman whose famous rock star and has a sort of cult following to her, but she disappears one day when she reunites with a past lover. And it's described as a loose retelling of the Orpheus and Eurydice tale in mythology, and it's about the devastating effects of using your lover as a muse. I think that sounds like such an intriguing story, so I'm very eager to read this. Then I have a couple of reprints of older books. So first is a novel called The Last and the First, and it's by Nina Berberova, who's a Russian writer of the 20th century, and this is published by Pushkin Press, and you can see a picture of the author here, gorgeous, and so it's translated from the Russian by Marian Schwartz. And this is a novel about a family that flees Russia after the revolution and civil war to settle in a town in France to establish a farm there and make a new life for themselves. And one brother, the younger brother, wants to stay in France and, start a new life for their family and persevere. But he has a stepbrother who wants to go back to Russia and join the political changes there, and so it's about that tension in the family during this historical period. I think it was first published in 1929, so quite a while ago, and I've not heard of this Russian writer before, but yeah, apparently she produced a number of books, but yeah, sounds really interesting. Speedboat by Renata Adler, and this is a novel which was first published, I think, in the early 70s, and it's meant to be autobiographically inspired because it's about a journalist who moves to New York and is trying to navigate the landscape of that city, but also try to figure out her voice as a journalist in all of these encounters she has with a wide range of people. And so this is reprinted by W&N, that they're reprinting a number of classics, which they call their W&N Essentials, and it has an introduction by Hilton Als, who describes how this is really like a foundational work for a lot of journalists who want to find their own voice and figure out how to navigate the field of journalism and negotiating how do you distill truth into language and tell a story while keeping to the essential facts. I have a couple of newly translated novels, and they both happen to be by women, and here on BookTube, Kendra Jen and Matthew Sharapa all announced recently that they're going to be hosting the Women in Translation Readathon in August, because August is Women in Translation Month. So these are choices that I might want to read next month for that, and I'm going to be searching out some other choices as well. So first off, there is People Like Them by Samira Sedira, and it's translated from the French by Laura Vergnard. And so this is the story of a small mountain town and the people that live there, and one day a fairly wealthy family moves into the neighborhood and is slightly like out of place with the kind of humbleness of the other people that live there, but they do form a connection with another family, but there gradually racial tensions begin to arise and creates a conflict and a very dramatic event, and this is based on a true story, so I think this is the first time this author has been translated into English, but it's described as being for fans of Leila Slimani, and I've enjoyed reading her writing before, so yeah, I'd like to give this a try. Magma by Thora, big breath, Hjorleifsdottir, and it's translated from the Icelandic by Meg Matic. So this is a novel about a 20-year-old woman that falls in love with an older university student, and they quickly move in with each other and start a life together, but finds that she's subsuming her own life and ambition to his own, and it's about that whole process about how we can lose ourselves to another person when we fall in in love with them and the sometimes disastrous consequences of that. I have a group of new nonfiction, all about very different subject matter, but each of which I think sounds really interesting. So first off, there is The Melancholia of Class by Cynthia Cruz, and this is described as part memoir, part cultural theory, and part polemic, all about the condition of the working class, which are often viewed as the unseen and unrepresented members of our society. And she describes how the only way to overcome this is to assimilate into the middle class, to leave the working class origins behind, or total annihilation. And she describes this through a number of cases of individuals who came from working class origins, such as Amy Winehouse, and about their fates and the complications of trying to leave behind their working class origins. So I think this sounds like a really timely issue. Gifts of Gravity and Light, a nature almanac for the 21st century, and it comes with a foreword by Bernardine Evaristo, who, by the way, I mean, she's incredibly prolific, and it's just, I'm so impressed because she's written a new memoir, which is coming out, I think, later this year or the beginning of next year, and she's doing so much work. She's been a judge on the Women's Prize, and she curated this whole series of books for Penguin, and she wrote introductions for all of these books, and she's just so active, and it's just so impressive. But anyway, this book is in her foreword to this book, she describes how she always has thought of nature writing as sort of reserved for the white sort of middle and upper class members of society, but this book gives a different perspective on it, from a whole range of writers writing about the different seasons and their perceptions and interpretations of the different seasons that have to do some partly just from their own perspective, but also to do with their backgrounds and culture. And so it's looking at the natural world from a whole range of points of view. Conversations on Love by Natasha Lunn. Natasha Lunn is a journalist, and she decided that she wanted to try to figure out how relationships evolve over a lifetime, and how the process of love works over an extended period of time. So she consulted and interviewed a whole range of authors and experts on this subject matter. So these are her reproductions of those conversations, but it also includes sort of these memoirist pieces about her own experiences in love and relationships. And so you can see on the back a whole range of authors that she consulted on this, including Dolly Alderton and Candice Carty-Williams and Lisa Teldeo and Diana Evans and Elaine de Botton and Roxane Gay. So yeah, a wide range of authors. And so yeah, I think this will be a really interesting insight into this big subject matter. And then there is Our Biggest Experiment by Alice Bell, and this is a history of the study of the climate crisis. So a scientist and a women's rights activist named Eunice Newton Foote once described how the atmosphere was becoming too heavy with carbon dioxide, and how this was going to have a negative effect for our environment and the world itself. And this was in 1856. So scientists have been warning about this for ages, and so she traces the story and the history of that over time, and how this really gives a hopeful message for the future and the possibility of stopping climate change. I also have a few new collections of short stories. So first off, there is The Thin Line Between Everything and Nothing by Hannah Storm, and this is a collection of microfiction. So Hannah Storm is a journalist that has spent her life traveling around the world, and she's written this fiction about a whole range of people, describing momentary encounters that change their lives forever. And I'm always really fascinated by microfiction, because these are short stories that are often they're only like 2 or 3 pages long, so very, very short fiction, and how do you compact an entire story down into such like a compressed space, I think is fascinating. So it'll be interesting to see whether I think these are successful or not. Alone with a Man in a Room by Sean Levine. And I used to work with Sean on a literary review called Chroma, which he founded and was the editor of. And we went on some really great writing retreats, and yeah, it's just a lovely person. And so these are short stories, which he says in his introduction, he's been sort of working on these for so long, he doesn't really know anymore whether they're fact or fiction. And so it's the kind of blending of that like personal history of all these different encounters he's had with men over time. So I'm looking forward to exploring these. Ways of Living by Gemma Seltzer. These are 10 short stories all about different ordinary women living and working in London. And since I live in London, which is such a diverse, enormous city made up of so many different communities and cultures, I love getting different perspectives on the city. So I think this will be a good insight into all different kinds of different women's lives. And finally, I have a debut novel called Everyone is Still Alive by Kathy Rensenbrink. So Rensenbrink has written a number of memoirs, including Dear Reader, which I loved reading so much. I made a whole video about it. But this is her very first novel. So it's about a woman named Juliet who moves into the house of her late mother with her husband and her young son. And it's about how they try to join their local community and the uneasy process of that. And her husband is a writer, and how she tries to forge these new relationships and friendships with the people around her. But then when there's a summer party, there is disastrous consequences of that, and there's a big dramatic fallout to that. So it's following that story. I'm so curious to read what her actual fiction is like after reading her memoirs. So yeah, I'm looking forward to trying this. So those are all the books I'm going to talk about. Let me know if you've read any of these and if you would recommend any of these, or if you're really interested in reading any of these now that I've talked about them. Please let me know in the comments below. But I hope you're reading good things, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye bye.